Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Remaker's Mark. Here we are in the 5th episode of our What's Up Doc series, where we will be discussing the baking extraordinaire documentary Kings of Pastry. With me, as always, are my friends Andy Wicks, Jeremy Nilsson, Lee Ho-Ho, and Mark Joesting, and I am Kyle Delahunt. And I actually will not be your host this fine evening. I'm actually going to hand over the reins to Andy. Andy, this was your pick. So if you're cool, let's have you host this puppy.
Cool as a flash freezer.
Ooh, nice.
Is that what he used? Was
Topical.
it a flash freezer? Is that what he said?
Yeah, that was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, hi everybody.
Hey.
I'm Andy. Hi guys. Good to hear you.
Hello.
Hello. So Kings of Pastry is the 5th and final installment in our What's Up Docs series. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the film. We're going to talk about our histories with it, and then we're just going to dive into the sugary goodness that is this movie. Kings of Pastry is a 2009 documentary by D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hegedus.
Yeah.
Apologies, Ms. Hegedus. It follows 3 world-class French pastry chefs as they prepare for and compete in the quadrennial contest to achieve the title of, insert pronunciation here,
Meilleur ouvrier de France,
or M.O.F, the highest honor a pastry chef can achieve. And it comes with a cool tricolor collar.
Does it come with a free Frogurt?
It comes with a free Frogurt, and it's the best Frogurt you've ever had.
Nice.
My wife and I saw this movie years ago. I don't remember why this came across our screen, but it did, and we both really, really enjoyed it. It's a, I don't want to call it lighthearted, but it is kind of lighthearted. There are certainly elements of drama that we're going to get into, but in the end, it is a film about a pastry contest. So it's not like we're dealing with some of the other higher stakes issues that the documentary series that we've covered have talked about. Guys, what was your history, if any, with this movie? Jared, let's start with you.
This movie, I love pastries, but this movie was never on my radar in the slightest. I'd never heard of it, and I'm glad I watched it.
All right. Kyle?
Ditto. Yeah, I had no awareness of this. The closest I come to this is Great British Baking Show, which we will talk about later.
Mm-hmm. Lee, how about you?
I had never heard of it until you mentioned it. I very much like pastries as well, but I've never eaten a sugar sculpture yet.
And Mark, how about you?
I found out about this movie way back when you announced that we would be doing an episode about it.
So it's a little bit of a hidden gem / What's Up Doc.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, that might be reaching a little bit, but okay.
Well, as many of our documentaries that we chose were,
True.
A lot of them had not been seen by most of us.
That's true. I think I certainly hadn't seen any of them, and I'd only heard of King of Kong. We have 2 Kings documentaries here, which I don't think was anticipated.
Yes, we did.
To the movie, the film follows, as we talked about, 3 really world-class French pastry chefs. Jacques Pfeiffer is kind of the main character, if you could call him that. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation of, it looks like Regis Lazard to an English speaker, but I'm sure it's not pronounced that way. And then Philippe Rigolo. I'm going to apologize in advance for that one as well.
I think you got that one.
These 3 chefs who are all preparing for the competition and then competing in it, as we said. And it talks about the paths that all of them come from and the different steps they take to get there. For Regis, it's actually his second attempt at this one, at this title, which, as we talked about, occurs only every 4 years. So it's essentially, like an Olympic athlete competing. What are some of you guys' thoughts of the movie on the surface?
It looked delicious.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was well done, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of the style of it and how it. We think we were pretty surprised that this came out in 2009 because it sure doesn't feel that way in a lot of ways. But I think the characters, if you will, were interesting. I thought certainly the capture of the production of the food was really good.
Yeah, Lee, you talked a little bit about, in one of the scenes we see Jackie preparing a cake. One of the things they have to do in the contest is create a wedding cake. And you talked a little bit about that particular scene, Lee. You want to touch on that?
Yeah. Well, they show him going kind of step by step, designing. I guess it's like a half sphere almost.
Like a dome. Yeah. Half sphere.
That's made up of a bunch of different layers. And he's very meticulously drawing it out, planning on what each layer is going to be, going through, talking about his technique and how he's going to do it. And they show him doing it. It's very meticulous,
He essentially has to build it upside down also.
Yeah. And there's a lot of skill that goes into it. And then it's finished and they take a slice out and everybody tries it. And they all look very underwhelmed. And he goes, one of the guys says, "Oh, there's too much sugar in the mousse," or something like that. And he's like, "Yeah, kind of, yeah, whatever." And then it just shows him throwing it in the garbage. Like, what?
Like pristine looking cake.
Yes.
Yeah, that broke my heart a little bit.
Yeah, and I was like, I would have eaten that.
The thing probably took him hours to create.
Similarly to that, there's the scene early on when they're kind of introducing each of the characters and how their journey to this competition. And the guy has, I think, 14. He made 14 like sugar glass eggs, basically. And he said,
part of the sculpture.
I made, and I'm bringing 14 so I can fail 13 times. And then he ended up not using any of them because he failed 14 times. And it's just like, holy cow, this is serious.
Yeah. He said something like 50 gallons of sugar syrup down the drain.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
Oh,
that's just crazy. Like the level of perfection that they're going for is kind of astonishing and impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I found it weird that they built up a lot of that, like, this has to be perfect. You can't, like, this sugar glass has a little scratch on it. You can't have that. And they talk about all that stuff. But then at the end, when they're getting everything ready for this sort of showcase buffet, cakes and sugar sculptures and ribbon and all this stuff. And some of it is just very haphazardly thrown together like the end of a timed episode of some cooking show. It's like things are askew and pieces broke off, so they just throw those away and did something else instead. And it's like there was a weird disconnect there of like this has to be the best of the best or we're not going to make it. And then you see the end, it's like, oh crap, I just got to throw something out there.
Yeah, and even Jackie talks about that at the end. He said he finished literally seconds before the deadline and had to skip all these steps. And that's actually one of the plot points of the first kind of half of the preparation stage of the film, that his coach, if you want to call him that, is a gentleman who has won the M.O.F. Title in a few years, I think in the previous iteration of this contest. And it is the co-founder of the French pastry school in Chicago. The two of them work together there. And he talks about how Jackie's time management is such an issue. And even when he goes to France, so Jackie then travels to France to kind of finish preparing and get used to, he talks about getting used to using the French ingredients and how it will change, because things like the butter has a higher fat content in France than it does in the United States. And so all of a sudden that changes the chemistry of everything he's doing, and it changes the flavor of everything he's doing and how long it takes to make these things. So he has all those recipes, but all of a sudden he has to kind of not necessarily start over, but has to tweak all of them. And the time management becomes even a bigger concern. So I thought that was really, really interesting just to think, you think butter is butter. Well, not at that level. It's not.
Well, and how that one cake came out totally yellow because the eggs in France are significantly more yellow than they are in the United States. So everything looked different from a color perspective too.
Yeah, thought that was interesting.
Did I miss? So I thought that I saw at the end of the movie when they were sort of wrapping everything up, and the president of M.O.F., Grand M.O.F., or whoever he was, he was sort of kind of wrapping up, and he was talking about, and I thought he was talking about the guy from Chicago, but kind of said that one of the things holding him back is he's relying too much on his coaches, and he's losing who he is as a pastry chef and is sort of just aping what these coaches are encouraging him to do. And that was one of the reasons why they didn't pick him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Spoiler
that's how I understood it as well. That he was essentially pulling from all these other styles from his other influences and didn't really have his own style. So I took from that as like a musician who is so influenced by these 3 or 4 other artists that all they do is sound like those 3 or 4 other artists and they don't sound like themselves.
Okay, so I did read that right. Got it.
Well, let's just say we read it the same.
That's good enough for me.
We talk about in this movie, we've kind of hinted at it a couple of times, the sugar sculptures and the artistry that goes into these things. That yes, they're creating desserts, but almost as much a part of that is the artwork and the sculpture that they're creating. The theme of the contest in this particular year is a wedding. So everything is kind of as if you were catering a super high-end wedding. Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot here as you are our resident artist. Can you talk a little bit about, and I know you're an artist and I know you have done sculpture. I'm assuming you haven't done a lot in sugar in that particular medium.
I've done,
however,
0 in sugar.
Okay. So using your, let's say, adjacent artistic experience to sugar sculpture, can you talk a little bit about just how difficult that would be?
It'd be incredibly difficult. My analogous experience is in clay, and that's a medium where you form things, and then you have to wait for them to get into a specific consistency before you do anything else with them. In clay, that period of time can be days that you're waiting, but with sugar or with chocolate, that can be seconds.
Yeah, he does talk about how he has to get something that's dipped in chocolate off of the fork so quickly before it sticks to the fork.
Yeah. And that combined with the fact that they have to work on, they might have to work on several different things at the same time, it makes timing a very, very delicate issue. I mean, I personally, I get a little bit freaked out just trying to make dinner. I can't,
which is not a sculpture either, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I don't,
mashed potatoes, it could be.
Yeah, I suppose.
Could be. And it would mean something.
Well done.
Thank you. But yeah, I can't imagine the type of pressure that these guys face when trying to make something that's huge and gorgeous and delicate all at the same time, that requires that sort of timing. Suffice to say, you won't see me in any one of these competitions.
I did think it was, I mean, it's amazing what they're creating. And these sculptures are 3, 4, 5 feet tall. I mean, it's ridiculous what they're making. And it's not only they also had to make a small little centerpiece, which was maybe 18 inches tall. And that itself looked amazing and was in like this glass case. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But then they had to make this gigantic, obscenely large thing. But then they make them carry it like, I don't know. It's hard to judge the distance, but it's at least, let's say 100 feet through tight turns corridors, through low doorways, like from the kitchen that they're working into this outdoor tent where everything is being plated. You're just like, what? That just seems mean.
Mm-hmm. You thought Indiana Jones had it bad. Like they got nothing.
I know. It's like, it's like, why not make the room right next to the kitchen?
Yeah.
So, I mean, come on. So all this leads up to a moment in the film that I think we call it the climax. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
It's definitely the top of the drama.
Yeah. And I'm going to sidebar a little bit here to talk about the soundtrack, which I loved. Absolutely loved the soundtrack. If you're into, if you've ever seen like the Triplets of Belleville or
Dirty
like
Rotten Scoundrels.
Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, if you like Django Reinhardt, anything like that, you're going to love this soundtrack. But they timed the musical cue so perfectly in this one moment where one of the chefs is carrying his obscenely large sculpture. And I'm going to say a spoiler here. This movie came out 12 years ago, so deal with it. That this obscenely large, gorgeous, delicate sculpture
of Mr. Peanut, right?
It looks a little bit as if Mr. Peanut got married in some sort of, and you kind of like Art Deco'd him
to
up
the
a
Monopoly
bit,
guy.
You're not too far off. He has the sculpture. He made most of it on day 2 of this day 3 competition. Put it
Out
in
of
this
sugar.
out of sugar. Made it put it in this weird case that he made, to isolate it. It's like a hyperbaric chamber or something weird. And then he's bringing it back out on day 3 on the last day to finish up whatever little last thing he has to do. And as he sets it down on the table and the music pauses and slows down and stops and the sculpture just crumbles. And it's this, it's a heartbreaking moment.
Did you guys see what happened? Or here's what I think happened. I think, they're given so many details, including like the height of the table compared to the height of the ceiling. What I don't think he got was his thing was right under a fluorescent light. And I think like he fit perfectly from the table to the ceiling, but there was a fluorescent light that hung down, 2 inches, an inch and a half.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
And then it just went, just absolutely exploded. So I think that's what happened. That's what I saw.
That's what it looked like to me too.
I figured that the sculpture just gave up the ghost.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments that when it happens, everyone in this kitchen, and it's a very busy kitchen with all the contestants and all the judges, everyone, it's just silent. Because everyone knows the stakes of what just happened here. That, this guy is working. This is like the highest honor this guy can achieve. And he just fumbled the ball in the 1 yard line insert your tragic sports analogy here. You see the other judges who have already won the M.O.F. are consoling him. And he talks about the contestant talks about how he sees the judges in tears because they're so upset about what happened here and how they're so sad for him. But he also rallies and he turns the remainder of his sculpture into something and then is able to present something. So he comes through. And in the end, he's actually the only one of the 3 who wins the M.O.F. that year. Of the 3 that they follow, there's more that win it of the finalists. But he actually still came through. But that moment in that film was just,
to me, the movie, the whole documentary, and I could tell from the beginning that it was not going to end well. Like there was sort of a tragic, there was a tragic component to the whole thing, and you just sort of felt sad. But at different points throughout it, and culminating with that moment, it was like, this is like Great British Baking Show if the stakes were death. That's how I was so stressed out watching all of this movie.
If Great British Baking Show met the Hunger Games.
Right. All right, welcome to this quaint little baking show. By the way, if you lose, you will get nothing and your life will crumble around you.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. And so let's talk a little bit about Great British Baking Show. Kyle, I would like you specifically to talk about the Great British Baking Show and how it may have affected and influenced our viewing of this film.
Oh, for sure. This was, I don't mainline home and garden television or whatever, right? I'm not like a huge cooking show guy overall. However, it is a notable exception that I watch the heck out of the Great British Baking Show because it's amazing, as was talked about in the last episode we did. Oh no, in memoriam.
I think it's been a Remakers Recommends twice.
Yeah, deservedly so. There'll be more. It's so good, and it is so both calming, and yet you get so invested in both the process and the judges and the hosts and especially the contestants and what they have to go through. And it was very interesting how, having seen now a few seasons of the Great British Baking Show, how it kind of democratized what they were going through a little bit. There were a couple times where, like, especially at first when they were making what they were making, like that many layered cake, I was like, that would be a really, like, an exceptional cake on the Great British Baking Show, but it didn't seem outside of that realm. And then, of course, 3 minutes later in the documentary, they're making like, I don't know, like, what's his name? Dr. Manhattan's Castle on Mars out of sugar or something, like it was real involved, right? You're like, okay, all right. No, that's next level. I'll give you that for sure. But it's so interesting just to have the feel of that and to know the drama that goes into all of that and to be able to feel that. I feel like that made this experience more intimate, I guess. Like it really brought me into everything of that, because so much of the Great British Baking Show is the humanity of it and getting to know, like I said, those contestants and their strengths and weaknesses, and really, feel bad when they inevitably go or don't win or what have you. Like it really, I think it brought up the human part of this documentary even more so than what the documentary itself could.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that this documentary really started out and had a lot of it really showcased the sort of cutthroat element, and cutthroat's not the right word because they're not competing with each other.
There were 16 finalists, and theoretically all 16 of them could have won.
Yeah. So it's not cutthroat in that way. It's just cutthroat in the sense that any mistake, however small, is going to be the difference between success and failure, and that separates this competition, or whatever you would call this, from a show like Great British Baking Show, where it's a bunch of bakers from their homes that are just doing this. There's no prize money on the line. There really is nothing but bragging rights and the fun of doing it from that show, which is one of the things that makes it so quaint and great. But then you get to the end and the sugar sculpture collapse. And by the way, all those sugar sculptures just, for me, totally brought back, like, those were, what do they call it on Great British Baking Show? The showpiece?
Showstopper.
Yeah,
Showstopper. Those were showstoppers. That's all that was. Yeah. It was just showstoppers.
Yeah.
But then you get to that point where that thing collapses and you see everybody rooting for that guy, and the judges saying, like, it sucks. I know. Keep going. Do something else. Like, you can fix this. And like nobody's like, oh man, that's better for me, or what. Like, everybody felt bad, and you felt the empathy and the compassion in amongst all of it. And it's like that was the connection for me to watching something like the Great British Baking Show, where this isn't a competition. They're not fighting with each other. They all want the same thing, and they all can get the same thing.
One piece I wanted to talk a little bit about, and Kyle, you alluded to it when you talked about, and I think Jerry, you did as well, the human aspect of it. They all talk about, or at least showcase, the families or the significant others of these three contestants.
Yeah.
And you see a little bit that while, yes, they're all already elite pastry chefs, and they've already had to go through, I think, several rounds of competition to even get to this final round. So it's not like just, any Joe Blow can apply. Like it sounds like there were several steps to even get to this final 16. But they talk with the significant others of all of them, and all of them have expressed that, I mean, it's a huge sacrifice for these men to prepare for and participate in this contest. And really the preparation, I think, is the bigger one, because the contest itself was only 3 days, but they prepare for years, because it's an every 4-year competition. So one of them talks about, after the contest is over, then we can go back to regular life and things like that. And they all have young kids, and it's just, it's interesting. And I'm glad that was a part of the aspect of it, to not necessarily just make it seem like this lofty competition, but to really show there was a human cost to what they were attempting to do. And I'm also glad, I'm not glad that two of them failed, because really I wish them all the success in the world, but it was nice to see that two of them didn't make it, and you got to see kind of the repercussions and the follow through with those families, that they both kind of talk about, that they hint and allude at whether they will try again in 4 more years to try this. And I said, for one of them, Regis, it was already his 2nd attempt. They even talked about one contestant there, this was his 4th attempt at the title. That's 16 years of work towards this one goal, which I thought was pretty incredible. Let's talk about the documentary as a film itself. There was some comments earlier about the quality of the filmmaking. Kyle, you want to mention or talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's, like I said, the year of it felt like it was actually filmed in 1994, but they just released it in 2009. And I don't know, I really feel like the determining factor in this was what can they do to basically let the M.O.F organization agree to let them film, right? I mean, you talk about like winding narrow hallways and all the places that they have to go and things they have to get through. Now add a camera crew. So I'm sure that, they would have loved to have, whatever the, fancy 8K red camera of 2009 was, right? Probably just the red, actually, the original one. But, that's just not possible when you are doing this amongst, it's basically like people who are trying to fold balloon animals while wearing pinned gloves. Like it's not setting itself up for success. So anything that they can do to get out of the way, they had to do. Like this was the first people that were allowed to film this at all. Like they had never had any kind of filming before. So I really feel like that is likely why. The result of that was it just didn't seem very fancy. You know what I mean? It seemed like it was the M.O.F organization hired like a chamber of commerce from one of the cities to be like, hey, film this. Like, okay, cool. But obviously the storytelling was more advanced than that. And it was crafted more thoughtfully than that. But, just the capture of it definitely felt kind of lo-fi.
So to tag on to what you said there, there's a note, and I'm going to quote directly from the Wikipedia page for Kings of Pastry, that, quote, permission to film the competition in Lyon was granted to Pennebaker Hegedus Films at the last minute, though the M.O.F committee stipulated that the filmmakers use only certain sound and lighting equipment. On the final day of the competition, the judges further restricted the camera team to filming from designated 3-foot square boxes drawn next to the assembly tables, unquote. Which I thought was very interesting. So yeah, the crew was incredibly limited in what it could do. I thought they did a good job. They made the pace of everything with everyone running back and forth inside the kitchens. That was communicated very well to me. It just seemed a little lo-fi at times, but other than that, I really enjoyed it.
Well, I think it went in to talk about like why the movie was made the way that it was, which was I was kind of frustrated by how much time was spent on the preparation of these things. I wanted a little bit of that, but really I wanted, to see the final product, to see them making it in that kitchen. But the reality was that they couldn't do that the way that they had to film. And so they think they had to realize that and then rewind and say, okay, well, the actual making of this stuff, we're going to be able to get 4% of what we want to. But when they're in their home kitchens or in their test kitchens, we'll be able to get, 100%, if you will. While the stakes are going to feel different, we're actually going to be able to get the footage that we want and capture that. So I feel like that informed kind of the organization of it, where so much of that was actually earlier on in the film, and then the rest of it was just capturing the mood of everything that was happening in that room and less of the actual food sculpture, if you will.
There was so much that was filmed in a way that felt like it was just the cameraman holding the camera up over his head and just recording, because there was no room to do anything.
It was his one chance to get a shot.
Yeah, I don't know if that helped or hindered, but it definitely definitely helped make the stress level come through of everybody. And I'm just, now that you read that about their camera equipment and what they're allowed to have, I'm just imagining one of these guys making one of these amazing sculptures and then having some harsh filmmaking light on it, melting the sugar right before it's about to get judged, and how pissed off I would be by that. So I can understand that they would want to keep all of that as regulated as possible.
I think there's a bit of poetic irony in, presenting all of these really elaborate, visually stunning works of art in such a lo-fi way. I think that makes the documentary perhaps a little bit more interesting for me.
Adding to the raw quality of it was a pretty much total lack of discernible post-production. Like there is zero art in added to the film. Like there's no animation. There are a few titles, but they look like they're done in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is
the Affordable Font Corporation.
yeah, there's very, very little added to the footage. It's like they filmed, they edited, and then they were done. Which is another notable difference between this and the Great British Baking Show, which has amazing post production.
Yeah, their production budget must have been much higher. Before we wrap things up, I just wanted to do a little follow up on at least two of the chefs that were mentioned. So starting with Jackie Pfeiffer, the main character, if you will.
He's the one from Chicago, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he lives in Chicago. He is the co-founder of the French pastry school in Chicago, which I believe is still exists and that he still works there. So he did not win the M.O.F. and has never won it. But prior to the competition, which was in 2008, that he had already won 7 awards, including Pastry Chef of the Year by the World Pastry Forum in 2004. And the Jean Banchet Award for Culinary Excellence, Best Celebrity Pastry Chef in 2005. So he was already very well regarded in that one, and then continued to win several awards, including the James Beard Foundation Book Award for baking and dessert with his book, The Art of French Pastry, which was published in 2013. So good on you, Jackie. And then Philippe Rigolo, I was trying to look up some information on him. So he did win the M.O.F. in that, despite the crash of his sugar sculpture, because the rest of his stuff was so good that he, at the time and leading up to the competition, had been the pastry chef at the only 3 Michelin-starred restaurant owned by a woman, and then left that to start his own patisserie shop, which is still open. And his wife actually is the chocolatier at the shop, and she sounds like she's equally as capable. So he has also won. He's done very well for himself. Regis Lazard, or however you would pronounce his name, I couldn't really find any information on him. He seemed like he kind of dropped off the map. He, as far as I can tell, also never won the M.O.F.
That brings up a question I was going to ask and I forgot. All of the contestants, all 16, were men. Are women allowed to be a M.O.F.?
So that was a thought that I had as well, in that, yes, they're all dudes in this film, and everyone you see that has won it was also a dude. So I was also curious about this. And this title, M.O.F., as I'm looking on the Wikipedia page for it, has categories like hospitality, buildings, clothing accessories, beauty and aesthetics, textile industry. So it's not limited only to the pastry chef. It just happens to be one category. As it was said earlier, it simply means a craftsman of France. So someone who excels in their field. But in this one, I'm looking to see here. So the is the pastry one. Pastry making is under the hospitality category, in case anyone's interested. I'm just going to live describe my Wikipedia surfing right now. It's really exciting. It's good radio.
You send me voicemails of you doing this all the time.
Just want you to know how I'm doing, Jer. Now I'm driving. That it would be interesting to know if anyone has any information on whether women can win this award. Let us know.
I have information.
Ooh, Mark, well done.
Thank you. Yes, it turns out that women have won the title.
Good.
Yay!
Only 2 of them.
Excellent. But in pastry specifically, or in general, or in other categories, I should say.
That I can't tell. At least from this one article that I'm looking at right now. Further research may reveal it.
Okay. Let's move on to our ratings of the film. We're going to go backwards alphabetic.
Hey.
Mark, let us start with you. How would you rate this film? What number would you give it in the rating scale of your choice?
I'm going to give this one 7.5 shattered dreams.
Nice.
Ouch.
You got some 80s vibes in there too. That's good.
Lee, how about you?
I would rate the production very low, but the subject matter very high. So averaging that out, I would say 6.5 sugar caramel mixtures.
Very good. Kyle, how about you?
Much the same as Lee. I honestly didn't really, it didn't freak me out that it didn't look well made. It was just kind of odd to me. So I will give it 6.4 trash cakes.
That I would love to try.
Right.
I would eat that trash cake. I like Lee. I really enjoyed the content of it. I just didn't, the way that it unfortunately was forced to be filmed didn't do much for me. So I'm going to give it 6 private basement kitchens.
Nice.
Those are called murder dungeons. I will rate this one. I'm pretty much on the same page as all the rest of you. I'm going to give this one 7.0 sullied cream puffs.
So sullied.
There we are. Remaker's Mark is a proud member of the Math is Hard network. To find out more information about this podcast or any other podcast on the network, check us out at mathishard.net. There you will find show notes with links to all of the people, movies, and links discussed in this episode. This delicious, delicious episode. The information is also attached to the show file in the podcast client of your choice. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the usual. Please rate and review Remaker's Mark. It would mean the world to us. And now we're on YouTube. There's an exclamation point there. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. Search for Math is Hard Net or Remaker's Mark. And on Twitter at Remaker's Mark. And on Instagram at Remaker's Mark Podcast. So join in the discussion there too. Gentlemen, thank you for going on this culinary journey with me. And may the Force be with you.
And also with you.
Hi, and welcome to Remaker's Mark. I'm Andy Wicks, here in the driver's seat for... Plus, you know what, Kyle? You just do it.
Okay, I'll hand it off to you.
I can't handle this pressure.
You're no M.O.F.
You're not the best worker.
Sorry, Andy. You're gonna have to wait 4 years to try to host again.
Yep. Special episode 36 is when you can try again.
All right, here we go.